This condition apparently is hereditary. It came from my grandmother to my father and to three of us as siblings. And my grandmother died from a laryngeal swelling on her neck. Okay, it took her within a very few hours. She just said that she was not feeling well. She came out of the shamba from digging, she went to lie down, and she was gone.
Hello there and welcome to yet another episode of Kaleke's Health Moments, where as always we live healthy one story at a time. This condition seems to be an allergic reaction, yet it's a potentially dangerous medical condition. Our guest talks about this rare disease, which is often misdiagnosed.
My name is Patricia Karani. I am a patient advocate for hereditary angioedema, and I do my work in sub-Saharan Africa. Hereditary angioedema is a swelling condition that normally manifests on the skin and as well as internally in the body. It comes up with progressive swellings that are debilitating and disabling.
HAE is a condition which is hereditary, which means it is inherited through families, where patients suffer from severe swellings of the body on different parts of the body. Can be the lip swelling, throat swelling, and swellings on other parts of the body, including the abdomen, and sometimes this can be life-threatening. It is a rare condition that affects 1 in 50,000 people.
Growing up, I discovered I had this condition through its manifestations. When I was young, I was normally a very playful young child. I would play all the games that the boys wanted to play. We would play tug of war, all the rough games that boys wanted to play, I wanted to play. And one of the triggers for this condition is physical trauma on the body. So I would get hit a lot. And one time when I was hit by the edge of a window, I got a larger than usual swelling on my forehead. And it covered my eyes, but back then it was not taken as something serious. When I progressively went into my teenage life, that was when I was in high school, the swelling attacks became more aggressive and more frequent. That was normally triggered by the hormones, which normally come up when you're a teenager. So I would get swellings every other month when the hormones for a lady, you know, they turn. These swellings now brought issues because I was in a boarding school, and every other time I was out of school going to hospital for admission. The school nurse, I remember, used to be very worried, especially when I got my laryngeal swellings, because I also swell with inside my larynx. Because this kind of swellings become life-threatening, because you will not be able to breathe, neither will you be able to swallow any saliva. So I was always rushed to hospital, at times even in the middle of the night. So at that point, because of the frequency and the fact that, you know, the secondary school life has a program which you have to follow, and I was always every other time out of the program because I'm unwell, we started researching with my family to find out what exactly this is, what it is called, does it have any medications, so that I can be able to conduct my secondary life in a more normal way. That is when, at that point, I met a doctor in one of the private large hospitals in Nairobi, and he told me this is called angioneurotic edema. That is what this condition was called back then. So the next thing he told me is that it has no cure. You have to manage the symptoms. And the symptoms are these frequent swellings that I got.
I think that HAE is a terribly underfunded and underinvestigated and under-resourced condition in terms of management, doctor training, patient awareness, globally, but particularly in Africa. If Africa is to keep up with the rest of the world, as we hope and plan to do, we are going to need to address the health inequalities. And the first step is to understand that rare and non-communicable diseases need attention. For rare conditions like HAE, we need to step up and ramp up the training in our facilities. We need to be able to provide the access to testing and management. We need our insurance companies to be able to provide treatment for patients, however rare the condition might be and however expensive it might be, especially if they are life-threatening. We cannot afford to lose a single life.
Once that was discovered, we had some sort of relief in the family to know that this condition has a name, you know, because we were always moving from one doctor to another, getting different medications. I was being used, you know, for different tests and trials of medication. It was really a traumatic experience for me and even my own body.
So the symptoms of hereditary angioedema have some common features with other forms of swelling. The common feature is that it is running in families, so swellings will have been in many generations of the family, and multiple people in the same family will have swellings that occur on their body. They will less likely or hardly ever have rashes or itching associated with it, and when there is a rash, it usually comes on in advance of the swelling coming on. However, the itchy rashes that commonly occur like hives with allergic angioedema do not occur with hereditary angioedema. The features are abdominal pain and swelling, swelling of the lips, hands and body, and these are big swellings, not small swellings. These are very big swellings. They come on gradually over days and last for many days. Again, different from allergic rashes and swellings, which come on quite quickly within usually 24 hours of eating and drinking something that causes an allergic swelling, and that too resolves quickly over a couple of days. Hereditary angioedema typically is a gradually increasing swelling over days that then lasts up to 5 days before it clears away. And as I mentioned, it can be life-threatening, especially if it affects the back of the throat and can cause obstruction of the larynx. That is a medical emergency and needs to be managed as such.
It reached a point where, you know, I got tired of going to hospital, because even as much as I had a diagnosis of this condition, the medications I was being given were not stopping that swelling. The swelling would continue. If a swelling started on my neck, it would still progress all the way to block my larynx. So I found myself going to hospital. It's not giving me any relief, but because I was in a school system, I had to justify by going to hospital. It affected my exams, especially because stress is also another trigger for the condition. So every time when it was time for exams, I was unwell. So I would find myself being given special exams out of the normal exams.
The specific triggers can be stress, hormonal causes, trauma, dental procedures, surgical procedures. These are all different situations which can trigger the body into releasing something called bradykinin, which is the chemical that is responsible for the swelling. And the inhibitor, the C1 inhibitor, which is the braking mechanism to producing this bradykinin, which is lacking or deficient, is what results in all of this massive swelling caused by the bradykinin.
You know, that also affected my friendship life, because when I was unwell, nobody wanted to be near me, especially when my face was all swollen up. I couldn't see, I couldn't swallow, I couldn't breathe. So that affected my social life as well. When I moved on out of secondary school into my college life, that again posed a challenge, especially when, of course, the triggers now were stress and hormonal imbalance. And I would find myself again rushing to hospital for medication, especially when I couldn't breathe. It reached a point, I got tired of the hospitals completely, because the medications that they were giving me were not assisting me. And I decided to stay at home. Okay, so when I stayed at home, I was ready for any eventuality. whether I live or die. I was always ready because this condition apparently is hereditary. It came from my grandmother to my father and to three of us as siblings. And my grandmother died from a laryngeal swelling on her neck. Okay, it took her within a very few hours. She just said that she was not feeling well. She came out of the shamba from digging, she went to lie down, and she was gone. So this condition, now I felt like this is something I have to live with. It's either it takes me or I survive. So I chose to stay at home with my own medication. I used to take antihistamines. Now, unfortunately, antihistamines are not a resolve for this swelling because antihistamines are used for allergic angioedema, meaning swellings that are brought about due to allergies. My swellings are not brought about due to allergy. They are brought about due to a deficiency in a protein called a C1 esterase inhibitor. So you see, I was being given the medication that was not proper. I decided to, because that's the only medication I knew. I used to overdose on the antihistamines. Like in a span of one day, I would have taken a whole bottle of celestamine and a whole bottle of Piriton. I had to combine those medications to see whether they are going to stop the swelling from blocking my air and windpipe.
HAE is difficult to diagnose because swelling can occur for many different reasons. We've talked about allergies. There are other causes of swellings as well. And HAE, being rare, is often something that is thought of right at the end and often can take a long time before it's diagnosed. Now, because the tests are often difficult to do, they're expensive, they're not easily available, they're not readily done, and so what happens is it's a diagnosis of exclusion, unfortunately. It's not the first thing that comes to doctor and clinicians' minds. Part of that is because of education and doctors' awareness. Part of that is because generally it is the least common and so least likely to be investigated. However, once patients are diagnosed, it is recommended that they have family screening and then, of course, management from there on.
The worst of my experiences that I remember up to today is one time when I got swollen from a pimple on my face. And that pimple swelling progressed onto my throat. It closed my food pipe, so I couldn't swallow. I was drooling out my saliva. And it was threatening my windpipe, so I was rushed to the emergency ward. And I remember seeing so many doctors coming to see me, like high-profile doctors. They were wondering, how do we handle this girl? She's almost about not to breathe. And that is the same day when I was told what the condition was, because there came this doctor who said, I know what this condition is. It's called angioneurotic edema. This doctor, I remember, because they wanted to, do a tracheostomy where they cut a part of the throat to put tubes into the lungs, because I was reaching a point where now I was struggling literally to breathe. And he told me, you know what, because I know Patricia can feel how the swelling is progressing, she's the one who's going to tell us whether she wants a tracheostomy. So I remember I was in the ward, and I was still struggling to breathe. It was so hard, it was so painful. And I was still choking because at times you can't prevent saliva from going down and there was no route for the saliva. So I don't know what happened. Either I got exhausted or I went into a semi-comatose state because there was not enough oxygen going through. And my mom was here beside me asking me I remember she was seated with her rosary praying. She asked me, Patricia, do you want these doctors to perform this surgery? And because I couldn't speak, I could only write. I just wrote down no, okay? And after that, I blacked out.